The moment it began, Emily Carter was standing in traffic on Interstate 5, staring at a red light that refused to change. Her phone buzzed on the passenger seat. One new message. Just her name on the screen. For reasons she didn't yet understand, her heart skipped. Nothing dramatic had happened. No secret meetings. No broken promises. Yet in that single second, Emily felt it clearly something in her life was about to shift. And once it did, there would be no easy way back. Emily lived in a quiet suburb near Seattle, the kind of place where lawns were trimmed, neighbors waved politely, and evenings ended early. She had been married to Daniel for 9 years. They met in college, built a life together step by step, and did everything the right way. Stable jobs, a comfortable home, shared routines that once felt safe but now felt hollow. Daniel wasn't a bad husband. That truth made everything harder. He was steady, loyal, and kind in a quiet way. But somewhere along the years, our conversations had turned practical. Bills, groceries, weekend plans that never changed. They slept beside each other, yet Emily often felt alone. She worked as a project coordinator at an architecture firm downtown. Her days were busy and demanding, but predictable. She liked structure. It kept her from thinking too much. Then Michael Reynolds joined the firm. Michael was in his early 40s, calm, thoughtful, and professional. He wasn't flashy or overly confident. He spoke carefully, as if he respected words. In meetings, he listened more than he talked, but when he did speak, people paid attention. Emily first noticed him during a team meeting that ran longer than planned. People were tired, restless. Michael made a quiet comment that lightened the room. It wasn't a joke meant to impress. It was gentle and honest. Emily smiled before she realized she was doing it. They didn't become close right away. At first, they exchanged polite greetings. Then, short conversations about work. Over time, those conversations grew longer. They discussed projects, deadlines, design ideas. Nothing personal. Nothing wrong. But something felt easy between them. Michael remembered details. He noticed when Emily looked overwhelmed and asked if she needed help. He thanked her for her work in ways that felt sincere. Not flirtatious, just respectful. Emily told herself it was refreshing to feel seen. Weeks passed. The office settled into a rhythm that included Michael as if he'd always been there. Emily found herself arriving earlier, staying later. She told herself it was dedication. One afternoon, the printer jammed while they were both waiting. Michael sighed softly and said, "This thing senses urgency. It only fails when you're already behind." Emily laughed, surprised by how natural it felt. That laugh stayed with her all day. Soon, conversations drifted beyond work. Favorite books, old dreams, cities they loved. Michael mentioned his wife Laura, who worked long shifts at a hospital. Emily spoke of Daniel, of how long they'd been married, of how life felt settled. They never complained outright. They didn't need to. The spaces between their words said enough. Emily began to feel something she hadn't felt in years: anticipation. She noticed it on Sunday nights when she thought about the week ahead. She noticed it when Michael's name appeared in her inbox. Her heart reacted before her mind could stop it. At home, Daniel sensed the change without understanding it. Emily was quieter, thoughtful, sometimes distant. He asked if she was stressed. She said work was busy. He suggested a weekend away. She smiled and said, maybe. She hated herself for the relief she felt when plans didn't work out. Michael struggled too. He told himself this was harmless. Just friendship. Just connection. But he knew better. He felt it when Emily walked into a room. He felt it when he thought of something funny and wanted to tell her first. He loved his wife. He believed that. Yet something in him felt awake in a way it hadn't for a long time. The line between them was never crossed in obvious ways. No secret messages late at night. No hidden meetings. No promises spoken aloud. But emotional closeness doesn't always need rules to be broken to feel dangerous. The shift came during a late evening at the office. A project deadline had kept most of the team working late. By the time Emily saved her files and shut down her computer, The floor was nearly empty. Michael was still there, reviewing documents. Outside, rain tapped against the windows, soft but steady. They talked about pressure, expectations, the weight of responsibility, about how adulthood often meant putting feelings aside because there was no room for them. Emily surprised herself by saying, "Sometimes I feel like I'm living a life that looks right but doesn't feel right." The words hung in the air. Michael didn't rush to respond. "I know that feeling," he said quietly. They didn't move closer. They didn't touch. Yet the moment felt intimate in a way Emily couldn't explain. Michael stood up first. "It's late. We should head out." Emily nodded. Her chest felt tight. They walked together to the elevator, silence thick but not uncomfortable. When the doors opened, they stepped inside, standing on opposite sides, pretending not to notice how aware they were of each other. At the lobby, they went separate ways. No lingering goodbyes. No looks back. But that night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay beside Daniel, listening to his steady breathing, staring at the ceiling. Her thoughts raced. Guilt, confusion, fear. She hadn't done anything wrong, at least not in ways people could see. Yet she felt like she was carrying a secret. She asked herself questions she had avoided for years. When had her marriage grown so quiet? When had she stopped feeling desired, understood, alive? Most frightening of all was the realization that Michael wasn't the problem. He was only the mirror. The next morning, Emily woke with a sense of urgency. She decided to pull back, to focus on her marriage, to stop letting thoughts wander where they didn't belong. At work, she kept conversations short, professional. She avoided eye contact longer than necessary. Michael noticed immediately. He respected the distance, but it hurt more than he expected. He understood why she was doing it, which made it worse. Days passed. The tension didn't fade. It grew heavier. Emily tried harder at home. She cooked dinner, asked Daniel about his day, suggested plans. Daniel responded with warmth, grateful for the effort, unaware of the storm behind it. Yet even in those moments, Emily felt divided, half present, half elsewhere. Then came the message that changed everything. It was simple, work-related, a scheduling question. Michael's name appeared on her phone while she sat in traffic. Her heart reacted before her mind could stop it. That was when Emily understood the truth she had been avoiding. What she was feeling wasn't a passing distraction. It was a connection she hadn't expected, hadn't planned, and didn't know how to escape. And deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. Because once you realize your heart has wandered, the hardest part isn't stopping. It's facing where it wants to go next. The night Emily realized she couldn't ignore it anymore began like any other rain against the windows. Traffic humming outside, the quiet weight of routine pressing down on her. But inside, her world felt unsettled. She had spent weeks pretending, keeping conversations with Michael professional, avoiding the glances that had become dangerous in their subtlety. Yet pretending didn't erase the feeling that had taken root inside her, a pull she couldn't name but couldn't escape. She stared at her phone, thumb hovering over a message she hadn't sent, and felt a rush of something both thrilling and terrifying. She knew this night would change everything. Work had become a battlefield of emotions hidden behind polite smiles and professional language. Every meeting, every shared coffee, every passing hallway greeting carried weight. Emily tried to ground herself in reason. Michael had a life, a wife who trusted him. She had Daniel, a husband who still loved her, still believed in their shared life. But logic didn't control her heart. Feeling did. It had started smaller laughs shared. A conversation that lingered, and now it was impossible to ignore. Michael felt it too. He avoided unnecessary eye contact, minimized conversation, and tried to focus on his wife, Laura. But no matter what he did, Emily occupied his thoughts. He remembered the way her laugh sounded across the office, how her eyes lit up when she spoke about ideas she loved, how she seemed alive in a way that reminded him of what he had once forgotten to feel. He wrestled with guilt, with the knowledge that any acknowledgement of his feelings could destroy what he had built at home. Yet the pull was undeniable, constant, unavoidable. The tipping point came during a business trip. Vancouver, a city of gray skies and bright lights, where the office walls that had kept them safe now seemed small, constraining, irrelevant. A delayed flight forced Emily and Michael to spend hours in a quiet hotel lobby, rain blurring the city streets outside. The empty space, the hushed environment, the shared exhaustion, all of it created a moment that demanded honesty. Emily broke first. "I don't know how to stop thinking about everything," she said, her voice trembling slightly. She didn't name it. She didn't need to. Michael understood. He nodded, his chest tight, and said quietly, "I know. I felt it too." They didn't move closer. They didn't touch. They simply shared the truth of their emotions, laying bare feelings that had been simmering for weeks. Words that had been unspoken suddenly became unavoidable. There was no triumph, no excitement, just the raw, simple acknowledgement that something profound had taken root between them. An emotional intimacy they hadn't sought but now couldn't deny. After hours of talking, Michael stood first. We can't do this," he said, though his voice lacked certainty. Emily agreed, nodding, though her heart resisted. They left the hotel separately, carrying the weight of something neither could act on, but neither could forget. Back in Seattle, the tension became impossible to hide. Emily's connection with Daniel was strained by the secret she carried. She tried to focus on their marriage, on rebuilding what felt fragile. But every conversation, every shared meal reminded her of the distance she now felt inside. She loved Daniel. She always had. But love, she realized, wasn't always enough to make someone feel fully alive. Michael returned home to. He tried harder to be present with Laura, to remind himself of why he married her, of the life they had built together. But even in the quiet moments of domesticity, making dinner, folding laundry, checking in after a long day, his thoughts drifted to Emily. He realized that emotional connection doesn't respect time or circumstance. It exists or it doesn't. And when it exists, it doesn't wait. Emily finally reached a breaking point one Sunday morning. Sitting across from Daniel at the kitchen table, she made a choice. She spoke honestly about what had been happening, not with salacious detail, not with accusations, but with clarity. She explained the distance she had felt, the unexpected connection she had developed, the internal conflict that had left her restless and uncertain. Daniel listened. His eyes softened with sadness, but there was a calmness in his voice when he finally spoke. "I wish you had told me sooner," he said. There was no anger, no shouting, only a quiet grief that carried the weight of lost time and unspoken truths. It was devastating and liberating all at once. Michael had a similar reckoning with Laura. He admitted the truth. The moments of emotional closeness that had grown between him and Emily. Laura listened, hurt but composed. She asked questions, he answered with honesty, and together they faced the challenge of trust, fractured yet not destroyed. Counseling followed, discussions late into the night, tears, moments of silence, moments of clarity. They didn't know where it would lead, only that it required honesty and courage. In the aftermath, lives shifted irrevocably. Emily and Daniel chose separation not out of anger but out of acceptance. Their love had changed. It wasn't the same life anymore. They walked apart with dignity, grateful for the years shared. Mourning what they lost, but understanding that holding on would have been worse. Michael and Laura continued counseling, uncertain of the road ahead, but committed to working through the fracture that had threatened their life together. Emily and Michael never saw each other again. The connection they had shared, powerful, profound, unexpected, was a chapter closed, not a beginning. Yet it left its mark. It reminded them both that feelings cannot be controlled, that emotional bonds can awaken parts of ourselves long dormant, and that recognizing these truths sometimes requires sacrifice. For Emily, the lesson was clear. Life is complex. Love is not simple. Sometimes the most meaningful relationships are not the ones that last, but the ones that teach us who we are, what we need, and what we are capable of feeling. She carried the memory of that connection quietly. One carries a secret treasure that is too precious, too fragile to show anyone else. Michael learned the same. Love is layered. Commitment is tested by emotions that refuse to be contained. The past does not vanish and the heart does not forget. Yet moving forward, even with wounds, is possible. In the end, what they shared was never meant to happen. It was not a betrayal in the typical sense, for nothing physical had crossed the line, yet emotionally it had shaken the foundations of both their lives. And that was enough. They had awakened something vital in each other, but they had done so at the wrong time, in the wrong circumstances. The connection ended, but its echo remained a reminder that life is unpredictable, that hearts are not entirely rational, and that sometimes the hardest truths are the ones that teach the most. Emily, now standing in the same Seattle streets that had once felt dull, felt a strange clarity. She knew love was not always about possession, not always about being with someone forever. Sometimes it was about recognition, awakening, and courage. She walked past familiar houses, past neighbors who waved politely, feeling alive in a way she hadn't in years. The past was closed, but the lessons endured. Michael, sitting in his living room in the soft glow of a lamp, thought about what had happened with Emily. He didn't regret the emotional truth they shared, though he grieved the impossibility of continuation. He and Laura were healing, and he realized that understanding, honesty, and courage were more important than comfort. Love required them to face the truth even when it hurt. And so life went on. Emily and Michael moved forward separately.